really quickly. It says Q&A at 2 p.m. We just decided, since we're starting so late, to just defer that. So we'll have it after the second presentation at 3 p.m. Okay? So it's my responsibility now to introduce Dr. Walsh, whom I've known for many years. He's been a part of a lot of our Watch and Pray. I'm so glad that he was able to do it at a very, very short notice. So thank you, and his lovely wife is in the back, last row, Jacqueline. Okay, I'm going to read this. Dr. Walsh was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He's a graduate of the University of Miami School of Medicine, Loma Linda University School of Public Health, where he received his master's and doctorate in public health. His most important educational experience was his time at Oakwood University. He has served 2 U.S. presidents, George W. Bush, as Barack Obama. I don't know where that came from. I'm sorry. Okay, so one more time. He served 2 U.S. presidents, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, as an advisor on HIV/AIDS. Dr. Walsh has served at several churches as associate pastor, and he's now a practicing physician and healthcare administrator. He travels the globe speaking on many subjects. His wife, Jacqueline, is his partner in ministry and his best friend. Thank you both for coming, and the next voice we'll hear will be that of Dr. Walsh. God bless.
Yeah, happy Sunday. Can you guys hear me okay? There was a microphone. You guys. So our scripture reading, we're going to read this scripture reading from Psalm 91, verses 1 through 3. Psalm 91, verses 1 through 3. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler, and from the noisome pestilence. Surely He will deliver thee from the snare of the fowler, and from the noisome pestilence. So our talk this Sunday afternoon now is COVID and the infection of mistrust. COVID and the infection of mistrust. We're going to get 2 parts to the talk as we go through it. Matthew chapter 24. Verse 1 says, and Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came out for to show him the building of the temple. Jesus said unto them, see ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him, privately saying, tell us, where shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of your coming, and of the end of the world? The disciples wanted to know when the end of the world would come. And they wanted to know when the end of Jerusalem would come. Of course, Christ was careful in responding to them. And so they were very concerned. This is an artist's rendition of the fall of Jerusalem under the Roman Emperor Titus. They were very concerned about this fall that would happen. And the disciples wanted to know, well, when will this be? When will this happen? So Jesus begins to give them some hints and some clues, as well as some solid prophecies. In Matthew chapter 24 and verse 4, and Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. Take heed that no man deceive you. The Greek word there for deceive is the word planeo. The word planeo, and it means to be led away. And when you look at this word, it means it is the same word used when the one sheep is led away from the 99. Jesus speaks to the fact that in the last days, the big deceptions that will come would be enough that if you are part of the body of God, you could be led away. So then he gives a few examples. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. He then says, in verse 5, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Or verse 6, see that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. Verse 8, all these are the beginning of sorrows. All these are the beginning of sorrows. When we look at the prophecy that Christ gives for the end time, he mentions pestilences. And as we look at the COVID-19 virus, and now all of the mutations. So we've gone from alpha, we've talked about Delta, now we have Gamma and Lambda and even Mu. We're going through the entire Greek alphabet pretty quickly here. This is one of those pestilences. We are told that this is just the beginning of sorrows. In fact, in Luke 21, 25 and 26, when Luke gives his version of this interaction between Christ and his disciples, he says, and there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and in the stars. And upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. The other part of what Christ warns us about is that men's hearts are going to fail them for fear. That means that there is going to be a psychological toll based on end time events. What is happening at the end of the world will so impact people that their hearts will fail. What does it mean when someone's hearts fail? Well, what they're talking about is diseases like anxiety, depression, stress-related diseases that ultimately translate into physical diseases like heart attacks, strokes, and heart failure. Literally, that is what Jesus is talking about. Men's hearts are going to fail them. So when we look at America, we can look at average life expectancy. This is by race. You can see if you're African American, it is the shortest life expectancy. Native Americans are next, white Americans, then Hispanic, then Asian. This is relevant because the pandemic has affected the way that this plays out. So if you look at this one here, the average daily deaths in the United States from COVID, just looking at June of 2021, you can see, and I can't let me show it to you here. You can see COVID came in number 7, sorry. So all of a sudden you have a new disease shaking up the world, really scaring people. University of Southern California, along with Princeton University, did a study on how COVID-19 has reduced the United States life expectancy, especially among Black and Latino populations. And what they say is this: they say the COVID-19 pandemic, which claimed more than 336,000 lives in 2020, has significantly affected life expectancy. They project that due to the pandemic, the deaths last year, life expectancy at birth for Americans was shortened by 1.13 years to 77.48 years. This is the largest single drop in decline in life expectancy in at least 40 years, and is the lowest life expectancy estimated since 2003. So we have watched the United States, the life expectancy decrease. So when people question the impact of COVID, you do have to understand there has been real impact, and definitely in the area of life expectancy. So the declines in life expectancy are likely even starker among minority populations. For African Americans, for blacks, researchers project that life expectancy was shortened by over 2 years to 72.78 years, and for Latinos by 3 years to 78.77. And for white Americans, it's smaller, but I would say still significant, at 0.68 years. So we are going to watch and see that decrease in life expectancy is going to be pretty significant. So what we did learn from COVID is that it doesn't work alone. There are a lot of things that help it do what it does. And one of the biggest ones is high blood pressure. And why high blood pressure? We'll talk more about that in a second, but it's because of the way the coronavirus actually attaches to the body through certain receptors. So it causes more disease. But you can see everything from high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, the coronary artery disease, which is what leads to heart attacks, kidney disease, dementia, COPD, all of those different things. And what we know is, as I was just saying, you can see here, this is the ACE2 receptor. This is the ACE2 receptor here, and you can see that it takes these spike proteins to come in and plug in. You've heard a lot about spike proteins probably. They plug into the ACE2 receptors, and it's through plugging into the ACE2 receptor that COVID causes disease. This is literally how it all happens. And so if you are someone with a lot of these receptors, which is partly what happens when you have some of these diseases, there's a lot more place for the virus to plug into. Part of the reason it does the damage it does. So we'll look at how it works here. And you can see from here that we've had almost 41 million cases in the United States. The number of deaths is almost 660,000. A lot of people say the deaths are exaggerated. I don't know, even if you cut that in half, it's still a pretty significant number of deaths since this pandemic began. There's a graph of new cases, and you can see going all the way back to last year, the different spikes that happened. This is all for all of the United States. Really got serious in January, and again here in August into September, where we are now, where it seems to have leveled off and might be coming back down. Hopefully it does come back down. Hopefully back to levels like in June when everybody started to go out and go back to normal life. And when everybody went back to normal life, it took off again. And that's one of the things that you have to understand about this, is that it probably won't just go away. Not like that anyway. So here's the statistics on deaths from New York Times and all of the United States. And with each surge in cases, you see there's a correlation in reported surge in deaths. And so when you look here, there's more than, in terms of the vaccine, they've already given out 5.66 billion doses, 33.4 million doses a day. In the US, 379 million doses, about 721,844 doses every single day. So lots of vaccine has also been given out. This is New York, right? You can see the waves. And look at how interesting this is. This is the cases, but this is the deaths. So somehow in New York, something has happened where they're getting the cases, but they're not getting the deaths. We can talk more about that later on. So New York doesn't have the same plateau. This is Connecticut. You can see the wave of the virus, of the surges, right? We obviously don't have the same numbers as New York or the whole country, but it mimics the other surges, right? So it was very low in June and it came back up here, but just like New York, somehow Connecticut is doing relatively well when it comes to deaths. The number of deaths has stayed relatively low, and especially when you consider some of the last spike, the deaths have really not caught up to that. And that's a testament to a lot of things. The more people have antibodies to the disease, the less deaths you're going to get. And the better we're able to treat the disease, the less deaths you're going to get. Both of those things have happened. Why do people have antibodies? Two reasons. One, a lot of people have already had COVID, so they have some form of antibodies. A lot of people have been vaccinated. That gives you antibodies. And of course, now we know about things like monoclonal antibodies that you can actually, after someone gets COVID, they can go to the hospital and be treated with it. And it actually has been shown that does show improved outcomes. They've also had some other things that they're doing now that actually seem to help. But overall, deaths are better here than if you look at the entire United States, where deaths in places like Florida and so forth have continued to actually not do so well. So this is, again, a vaccination overview. This is for New York and the United States. We just kind of mentioned all of that already. But just to let you know, there's other things on the horizon. Specifically, soon they're going to have medications. So we're talking about, just giving you a background on the pandemic. Soon we're going to have medications coming out from Pfizer and Merck, that of oral medications that they are going to claim will actually, you get tested with COVID, you take this antiviral and you won't get super sick, and that would end the whole pandemic, right? If nobody really gets sick from it, there's no reason for all the restrictions and everything to happen. So everybody's betting on this. I'm not 100% sure that's going to pan out, but we'll see what happens. This is just to give you an update of where we are with the pandemic. What we do know is that there are things that you can do to protect yourself. Things that are already available to us that you can use to protect yourself. And one of the things that you want to understand is the way that stress and disease intersect. The way that stress and disease go together. So last year, this is all the way back in September, there was an article, why researchers are worried about chronic stress and COVID-19. Could stress be another pre-existing condition that makes COVID-19 infection worse? I want to submit to you that as a physician and as a Seventh-day Adventist, one of the things I think that is underestimated in its ability to damage health is stress. It is completely underestimated. It does not matter how good your diet is, how much sunshine, water you get, how much walking you do, all of that ceases to matter if your stress levels get high enough. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. This is why one of the laws of health always mentioned is trust in God. That's why 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 is such an important verse of scripture for the health message. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a what? A sound mind. If people resort to panic and being anxious and afraid and are running around in circles with their arms up in the air, yelling and screaming, this is the end of the world, all the stress levels around that is enough to make them sick. That is the irony of this pandemic. The more people panic about a pandemic, the less their body is actually able to resist the virus, as I'm going to show you. And that's part of the reason the way I believe America covered it was a little bit off, because it really tried to scare people into submission rather than giving them education and proper information in order to get people to understand the dangers of what we were facing. And we were facing dangers. That's the truth. If you get this disease, some people get very sick and some people die. Some people, I hear people say, well, only, it's not a real disease. Only people most of the deaths are in people over 70 years of age. I'm not sure how that makes it right that you think it's not a real disease. My grandmother died at 86 years of age. I would hate to have lost her at 70 when I could have another 16 years of life with her. Are you guys getting it? Elvis Bradford, one of the great preachers in Adventism, just passed away recently at 96 years of age. He lived 26 years past and preached most of those 26 years. So this idea that, well, it's mostly people over 70, I don't understand how that justifies death. It loses me. Or when people say it's only 1.5% of people who die from COVID. Well, there are almost 400 million people in the United States and Canada. If 1.5% of them were to die, that would literally be somewhere around 4.5 million people. Which one of us wants to see 4.5 million people disappear in a short period of time in North America? You get what I'm saying? So a lot of what people do to try and make this not seem like such a big deal, they don't understand public health, and unfortunately a lot of them don't understand math. Because 1% of a lot of people is a lot of people. 4 million people would be a lot of people to die all at once in a span of a year or two in a country. No war has done that, right? How many planes would have to crash every single day for 4 million people to die? Right? Who would sit around and wait as the planes dropped out of the sky to reach 4 million? So this is why you see even the governments and society itself almost in a state of panic. This is why you see the CDC and the NIH and people are saying, well, they don't know, they are in a fright mode themselves because they are the ones who are supposed to protect the public health, and many of them, especially early on, had no idea how to do it. They didn't want to tell the American people the truth, in my opinion, on some things, like the shortage of masks initially. And PPE, they didn't want to just be honest and say, look, we don't know it. We don't have enough of these masks and stuff. So initially they came and said, well, don't wear masks. I don't know if you all remember, but that was the first thing they said, oh, don't wear masks, you'll touch your face more. But it was that inconsistent information that left space for anxiety and fear to come in. It also left space for misinformation to come in. And misinformation in the face of real information increases stress and anxiety. What I hear as a doctor is that I'm hearing so many different things, doctor, I don't know what to believe. And when you don't know what to believe, are you more calm or less calm? You're less calm. If you hear 5 different things from 5 different people about something that can impact your life, your health, and the life and health of your family, it's only going to raise your stress level. So we watch, don't miss this, we watch the collective rise in stress of a nation and a world. And I want you to see, if you want to see what the end time is going to look like, you do not have to wait for a zombie apocalypse as Hollywood wants to give it to you. Just look at how people responded to this. Look at the hatred, the division, the way people responded, the attitude people had. Forget the facts. Just look at how people behaved in the face of global pandemic. Imagine, church, what happens when it is natural disaster after natural disaster happening in the world. And they point and they say, it is those people who keep the Sabbath who are responsible. You're getting a taste of the ability of the internet to generate any kind of information at all. Misinformation galore comes out. People send me videos about this stuff, and it is so scientifically inaccurate. I am blown away. I remember someone sent me, as an example, a video of someone had gotten a vaccine, and they put a light bulb up to their arm, and the light bulb lit up. And they were like, look, if you get the vaccine, you'll light up a light bulb. I said, man, I need to get a bunch of them. I can plug into my house when there's a storm, and I won't need a generator. Misinformation. But here's the other thing. The devil is so slick. He's not going to just hit you with misinformation. At the same time, he's using that misinformation to shut down people putting information out. You see that was a double whammy? One, he's mastering the ability to give you misinformation, while at the same time, he's mastering the ability to regulate information. So guess what happened in the time of trouble? When they say, listen, it's them, it's them, it's them, and we say, no, it's not, no, it's not, no, it's not. They're going to be able to paint us any way they want to. We will have no way to defend ourselves. That's what's happening now. People think that the big thing is the vaccine. If you think that, you're missing what's actually going on. The big thing is the way that information is being created and controlled. That's what speaks to end time prophecy. Remember what it says in Revelation chapter 12? Out of the mouth of the dragon came a flood. And the woman had to be taken away. The dragon releases floods of misinformation. So, stress. Well, why collectively America's cortisol levels went up all at the same time? This is the stress hormone. And it's related. You can see at the top, it weakens your immune system, creates heart disease, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, digestive issues, nerve problems, anxiety, depression, headaches. Do not miss what I'm about to tell you. If you are stressed enough, the cortisol levels stay high enough regularly, your body will go into a state of fight or flight perpetually. What is fight or flight made for? It is designed so that when you are being chased by a dog, you can run as fast as possible. Or you can grab a stick and turn and challenge the dog. I choose to run. I'm not usually going to stay around and fight a dog.
Me too.
But I want you to get my point. Man, God did not design us to stay continually in a state of stress. So when and understanding the stress response, based on what I study in the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy, the very stress response your body gives is a result of having to live in a sinful world. Before the fall of man, there was nothing to chase you, nothing to fight. You couldn't pick up a flower and get stuck by a thorn. Now a mosquito would stick you and draw your blood and create a reaction. The fight or flight response is a response that God put in every man to be able to recognize danger in a world that would forever be hostile to man until God made this world over. So what does the devil want to do? As he wants to do, we're going to talk about addiction later on today. The devil wants to hijack your stress response. Because when you are stressed out, it changes your ability to think rationally. Oh, y'all missing this thing. It changes the way you eat. It changes your ability to have trust and faith in God. Satan wants you stressed out. That's why Paul warns Timothy in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. God did not give you a spirit of fear. Power, love, and a sound mind. And you can see, so like I said, even if you eat the best vegetarian diet, but your cortisol levels are always up, your liver is going to make sugar. Right? Your liver is also going to make fatty acids. Your body itself will now begin to work against you because it thinks it's in a constant state of danger, and it moves from a role where it is in a state where it can thrive to a state where it simply wants to survive. And that is not healthy. So what happens, I won't get into all the science on this slide, but I will show you that when your cortisol levels stay up, one of the things that happens is you develop what we call cortisol resistance. When you develop cortisol resistance, these are the inflammatory immune cells. You see that down here? When you do that, your cortisol is supposed to turn this off. But when you're always having high cortisol levels, you become resistant. Your body doesn't recognize it. So you get this inflammatory response that leads all the way back up in here into inflammation in the brain. That's what stress actually does. It inflames the brain if you're chronically stressed. So if you have bad finances, if you have a bad marriage, if you have a child that you're having trouble with, a job that you hate, a boss that can't stand you and you are not fond of either, the regular levels of cortisol turn off your body's ability to regulate how it responds to inflammation. And you're going to see that when it comes to coronavirus, that is a very bad thing to have as a problem. So, the equation that I use in my talks is stress equals demands minus resources. Stress equals demands minus resources. So, the more resources you have, the better you can deal with the demands of life. Amen? Here's why trusting in God is so important. Because if you have trust in God, you get resources from that trust. What Satan wants to do is give you false resources, like marijuana, alcohol, cocaine, caffeine, sugar, fatty foods, processed foods, T-bone steaks with a side of French fries. Somebody said, "Oh man, don't say that."
But these are false resources. As I'm going to show you, these resources, false resources, cause disease. What the Bible teaches is that God does not own 1,000 cattle on a hill. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He has all the resources you will ever need. This is why one of the pillars, maybe the most important pillar of all of the laws of health is trusting God. And this is why, even though the world has moved towards veganism and plant-based diets and exercise with yoga and all this stuff, without a proper trust in God, you can never fully reach maximum health. Never. Because the nicotine is going to call you. You're going to want to self-medicate when you're stressed out. And that is how disease really happens. So, what happens when you're stressed? In 1991, scientists studied the relationship between psychological stress and immune response, intentionally exposed 324 healthy participants to one of 5 respiratory viruses, including a coronavirus. Now remember, coronavirus, what I've read, has never been dangerous before the year 2000. In 2001 or 2003, SARS hit, that was a coronavirus. Remember 2008, Mediterranean respiratory virus, the MERS hit, that was a coronavirus, and now you have this coronavirus. Before 2000, we never saw coronaviruses as a lethal type of virus. But one of them was a coronavirus. The subjects were then quarantined and monitored. Even after controlling, and when you do a research study, you control for things so you can see what's actually causing the problem. Even after controlling for factors like age, sex, education, weight, and prior antibody status, the researchers found that a person's underlying stress levels were associated with an increased risk of getting sick. Did you guys get that? Why? What they found is that there are immunoglobulin A antibodies that line the mouth, the nasal cavity. When you breathe in a virus, you need those antibodies to grab the virus before it goes in your body and make you sick. When you are stressed, you don't make those antibodies. They don't come out. Why? Because your body's in a survival mode. Your immune system is lower priority because viruses seem like less of a threat than your bad work situation, your bad home situation, or the threat of financial ruin. Are you getting what I'm saying? So your body is not prioritizing your immune system. That's why when they say people get a vaccine and they still get COVID, well, 3 to 6 million Americans do not have good immune systems. It doesn't matter how much vaccine they get pumped into them. It doesn't matter how many times they get coronavirus. This is why people get the vaccine and still get it. This is why they get coronavirus and still get it. Because the immune system has been damaged. And one of the key ways I want to start with before we build to other things is, if you are living a perpetually stressed out life, you will not be healthy. You will not do well. And this is why people who are whole food, plant-based, conservative Adventists have gotten this disease and still gotten very sick. Because we sometimes don't know what might be stressing them out and causing their immune system to not act right, even though they seem on the surface to be doing everything else right. So, some other stuff that contributes to this, and besides cortisol or other hormones, won't really get into this except that all of these stress hormones have already been associated with severe COVID-19 cases. That's what we know. That's kind of where we are with all this. So in order to be healthy, you need to develop resiliency. We'll talk more about that. This is where trust in God starts this process. And stress, so right, your health equals how resilient your body is and how resilient your mind is, divided by the amount of stress that you have in your life. So, higher our stress, the poorer our health. Never forget that, because this is why Jesus gives you these verses. Matthew 11:28-30, he says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you what?" That is stress relief. You get that? Jesus understood this principle. He says, "Come unto me." Then he says in verse 29, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, For I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. Jesus says, why? For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. What else did he give? In Leviticus 23 and verse 3, the Sabbath commandment is given this way: 6 days shall work be done. The seventh day is the Sabbath of what? Rest. It is a Sabbath for stress reduction. You're not supposed to take the stress of the week into the Sabbath and carry that burden. A holy convocation, you shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in what? In all your dwellings. The Sabbath was given. And it before sin entered the world. But its importance after sin is just as great, if not in some ways even greater. It is the Sabbath where you walk away and say, you know what? I don't care what's happening on that job. If the building melts like butter over the weekend, I'm not going to mind. This is my time with God. To put my burdens at the foot of the cross. That's what the Sabbath is. If your Sabbath is stressful, reassess what you're doing on the Sabbath. It's the time when we fellowship together. Even if we go out to pass out tracts or to do community service, it should be refreshing. It should be recreational, not just recreational, but it should recreate. It should give us a new start, put a pep in our step. Because if we don't, what happens is, when you're stressed out, comfort foods taste and feel better. Don't miss this. The way that the food industry has designed food, and I'll get into it in the second part of this, they've designed it so that food will be the primary way that we manage stress. And that's why one nutritionist says stress spelled backwards is desserts. When you get stressed out and you bite into that brownie and wash it down with that glass of milk, it releases dopamine in your brain, endorphins in the brain. You get this little high, a buzz from it, and it doesn't matter how terrible the work is for that moment. But like the alcoholic learns, it doesn't matter how high you get, how drunk you get, when you come down, what happens? The problems have not left. In fact, oftentimes we've only made the problems worse. We've only made ourselves more stressed out. And so there's this concept of nutritional stress. And nutritional stress is one of the things you want to avoid. What creates nutritional stress is eating disease-forming foods. That is the SAD, the Standard American Diet. It is impossible to exaggerate the impact of having a Dunkin' Donut on almost every single corner in a state like Connecticut. I mean, sometimes you pass a Dunkin' Donuts to get to a Dunkin' Donuts. And as Michael Pollan, the author of the book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, says, that is not real food. That is food-like substance. It is factory created, designed by food engineers and food chemists. And so it does not really feed you. And so when you eat it, it actually extracts from you vital energy, nutrients. All those things are taken from you. And so it actually raises the stress in your body. But it is also not eating health-promoting foods, right? So what happens is you're only going to eat so much food in a day. If you load it up on unhealthy foods, you by default you displace what? Healthier foods. So we get super stressed. And the way that we say that is food we eat creates stress in our bodies. Food we eat creates stress in our bodies. This is a principle most of us never learned as a child. We didn't learn this when our mothers bought us breakfast cereals full of sugar, Pop-Tarts. When we had a birthday and we needed a treat and a pizza was ordered, or we were taken to McDonald's for a Happy Meal, none of us understood. Even our parents probably didn't fully understand the weight of what happens psychologically, physically, emotionally, and even spiritually when we do this. And in the middle of this pandemic, what we've learned is that all of this adds up. And so you see, there's the diseases we listed before: high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, and it shows you all of the ways that it creates immune dysfunction. You become hypercoagulable, meaning your blood clots more easily. But coronavirus does all of this. So when it comes into a body that is already stressed out based on these diseases, it allows the virus to do all these other things. This is why we have the pandemic we have, especially here in the United States of America. And what is critical to understand is that this is a disease of inflammation. That's what's important. So what you gotta understand is I talked to you about how stress causes inflammation. COVID comes in, plugs into those H2 receptors in the lungs, gets the inflammatory signal going. All of these cells respond from the immune system. And when your body cannot turn this down because your stress levels have already turned them all up, and it comes into this pre-made hyper-inflammatory situation because of stress, now the virus can kick in and do what it really wants to do. Produce a cytokine storm and some other big stress responses in the body that leads to all the diseases and bad outcomes of the coronavirus. So was it a good approach to stress the country out in fear over this virus? It was not. Because when you're stressed out, you don't do very well with managing inflammation and disease. So that is actually the last slide from the first talk. Okay? You said you want to wait and do the questions at the end? Yeah. Should we take like a few questions down? Do other questions? Because there's a lot more information going to come. So if you want to raise your hand and ask any questions on what we've done so far, what's been presented so far, please do. We can do maybe a few questions right now and then take maybe a 5-minute break and then we'll do the last half of it.
Can you get a mic?
I think one of the questions that people are asking is how effective is the vaccine when it comes to, especially for a person who does have hypertension, high cholesterol, and some of these things that we're talking about. How effective is the vaccine that we're being given?
Well, first of all, there is no one vaccine. There's at least 2 in the United States, and there's, I think I'm gonna have some slides later on. There's a total of probably 8 in the world, and a few more that are gonna come out that are not mRNA based, so it may change the way some people see this whole thing. What we do know, and this is fact, is that where the vaccination rates are highest, the number of people who wind up in the ICU is lower. The number of people who get super sick and ultimately die is actually lower. And probably contributing, besides New York having such a high infection rate early on, and then now have a relatively high vaccine rate, probably why you're seeing, the death graph for New York, but the rest of the country is pretty flat. So for all those things, it probably helps. Having antibodies is going to help. And that's really what the goal is. Now, there are a lot of people who don't want to get the vaccine. That's fine, but you have to understand, if you have those conditions, you really do not want to get the actual virus. Because the actual virus does wreak havoc, as we kind of talked about, in the body. But what the reason the vaccine is touted as working is because it does produce antibodies that then reduces some of these more severe consequences of the disease.
So I've been hearing that fact. So I've been wondering, how could that be changed with early interventions? And what I mean by that is, so I do medical missionary work, and some of the people that I've worked with have gone to the hospital or early in the pandemic, went several times, and they were told that they were not sick enough to receive treatment. So you're going 10 days or more just waiting at home. And that's where, as Adventists, we've been able, God has blessed us to be able to help people on the verge of very serious or maybe even fatal consequences. So my question is, how many of those cases that end up in the ICU of unvaccinated people or whatever could likely be averted if there's just early intervention of any sort?
Well, I'm gonna show you what some of the things that have been shown to work, from a nutritional standpoint and some other things in a minute. But the challenge is that it's so new that even when we think things work, they turn out to not work. And that's one of the reasons why some of the things that they jumped the gun with, they pull back on, even like with Remdesivir, which is the Japanese antiviral, not on the hand, may not work as good as we thought. I think, there's some natural things that people should be doing as soon as they find out they have it. And that's what I tell my patients to do as a way to protect themselves. But again, if you have significant COPD, so you only have 30, 40, 50, 60% of your lung that actually functions, and you got a big dose. Because one of the things they don't talk about in the news is the viral load and the viral shedding. Nobody ever hears about it. But one of the ways you get super sick from it, whether you're vaccinated, unvaccinated, had it before, didn't have it before, if someone exposes you to enough of the virus, it can overwhelm whatever protection you may have already had. Because it's just a sheer amount of virus. And when I worked in HIV, there's a lot of what we talked about. So in this case, that's part of what's happening here. We're in a situation where, especially as we start to open back up, people are getting massively high doses. So if their lungs are truly compromised, let's say you smoked for 30 years, it's very difficult to say, well, you're not going to need any sort of intervention or super early intervention to help, because they may literally be at a place health-wise where they're just super vulnerable. And so they're going to need oxygen, they're going to need other things that they're going to have to get in the hospital. But I do agree with early intervention. Like I said, we'll talk about some of those things in a minute.
People that already have the virus, why they need to be vaccinated? Why they need the vaccine?
Very good question. So there's two reasons that they say that. One of them is when you look at the antibodies afterwards, they found that it does begin to dwindle from natural infections. It can go down. Some studies that are saying that maybe it stays up longer than we thought, but a lot of that is based on a study. There's a study I saw out of Kentucky, and what they did is they looked at people who had already had it and then got vaccinated, who already had it and didn't. And those who had already had it and got vaccinated actually had a much lower reinfection rate or significant disease rate. And so that's why they say, listen, if you've had it, you may want to get it. Now, I think over time that advice might change when we get a little bit more sophisticated with drawing blood and looking at what antibodies you have, what level of antibodies you have. They may be able to say, no, at this level of antibodies, you're protected. There's no reason to do anything else. But it's so soon. Yeah, I think this is a disease that a year and a half ago didn't exist. So they're learning, and part of what they're doing, again, they're panicking. There's a question to say panic, but they're concerned. That's the way they say it. So they're trying to make sure that whatever advice they give from their perspective, based on the data in front of them, they're trying to give the best information to protect people. Because nobody wants to be the one who is running the health systems of this country when millions of people die or unnecessary infections happen. You saw the CDC has had to backtrack on things a few times, and that's why, because they get more information. Like, wait a minute, don't do this, let's do something else. But that's why they say it, because they think it's going to give you like super protection, especially as these variants come out.
I have two questions myself. Maybe I can ask last. You want to go first? You have a question? You want to go first? I'll let the ladies go first.
Yes, I'm wondering, does the virus cause a lot of clots in yours that go where you're weakest and everything? And what about the virus giving you too much of stress or something to make you more sick?
The virus?
The vaccine.
Well, there's one vaccine has shown that in very, very rare cases it can cause some blood clots, and that's the Johnson & Johnson. But in very, very rare cases, in fact, some studies say probably about the same occurrence as happens naturally, because taking birth control pills, smoking cigarettes, even taking a long car ride or a long plane ride, all increase your risk of blood clots that can be fatal, honestly. So that's one thing. And then what was the second part of the question?
Like they're going to stress your body out a lot, or that the vaccine is going to, it's just going to put a lot of stress on.
So I think what you're asking is a question that I've seen, and that is, if you take a vaccine, does it make it so your immune system won't respond to other infections? I've heard people say that, and I've seen no data to support that.
And, again, you see how many, 5.6 billion doses have been given out. We haven't seen this rise in other diseases. That hasn't happened. So I don't know if that's what you're asking. I do want to ask, can I get the drive back over here with the presentation so I can run it from here instead of this? I have a holder. For some reason, it saved it on your drive and took it off the most recent one off of my computer. So I'm not able to follow it like I want to.
I just have two questions if I can remember. One is Dr. Newton, Dr. Youngberg, and I believe the physician at UG Pond have medical missionary ways to prevent the disease. Like our college in 1918 when they had the Spanish flu and they did hydrotherapy and rest, not one single student died out of over 200 sick individuals. And so Dr. Youngberg and Dr. Netley recommend taking things like quercetin, zinc, NAC, vitamin C, and vitamin D.
We'll get to those. I'm going to talk about
Okay.
those in a second.
And then the other question I have is this. You mentioned the number of deaths, being 1.5% if there's 400 million people between Canada and the United States, and that will be over 4 million people have died. But if you look at the numbers on WHO site from March of 2020 to about January of 2021, we had over 3.5 million people died worldwide. That's way less than 1.5%.
So the percent of the people infected, though. So you got to look at how many people are infected. What we look at is what percentage is that of the people infected. When you look at the United States, there's been 40 million cases, about 41 million cases in the United States. 10% would be 4 million people, right? And 1% then would be about 400,000. We've had over 600 and almost 650,000 deaths, right? So when you look at the actual percentage of cases, that's what you have to look at. Because here's the truth about a pandemic. And it happened 100 years ago in the Spanish flu, and it's happening now. Eventually, everyone is going to be exposed to it, right? If they lift the restrictions, and we all went back to normal life, eventually you would get coronavirus.
Well, my question is then, if 50 to 100 million people died from the Spanish flu in 1 year, how come from March to January of 2021, worldwide, before there was any vaccine, only the numbers of deaths was about 3.5 million? If this coronavirus is as deadly as the Spanish flu that's been
It's not as deadly as the Spanish flu. So
so why do we have all this hype about passports and you have to get vaccinated? If you don't get vaccinated, like in Philippines, one of our friends, right now they've shut down the country, they cannot buy or sell unless they're vaccinated. And it's happening in Israel, it's happening in Australia. Why all this hype over something that's not as deadly as Spanish flu?
I think because it's deadly. And again, I'll go back to Christian compassion. The way I look at it is, and again, as a doctor, I look in the face of people and have to tell a husband or a wife that their spouse is not going to make it. And I think that's why they do it, because it's the individual stories of death that were preventable that they're really looking at. So if it's 4 million or 40 million or 100 million, when you're the one standing at the bedside, and I've had to do this many times, and tell someone, listen, you and your wife got this together and you went into the hospital, and only one of you is going to come out alive, that is very difficult. And so that's one of the reasons why they do it, because they're trying to prevent those deaths. And if you didn't mitigate, so let's remember, they shut the whole world down last year. If they had just let the world go on as it was, millions of people probably would have died based on what we've seen. Look at the small island of Jamaica right now. The coronavirus is kind of running through an island that doesn't have the most modern healthcare system. So, sometimes you can't get oxygen. Being intubated is not easy. There are less ventilators than they probably would need. And the deaths are racking up. We just lost one of the great preachers on that island from our Adventist university. And that's what they're trying to prevent, right? So the Spanish flu is far deadlier. But in fact, one of the reasons this virus is so dangerous is because it isn't as deadly. So people can get it, be asymptomatic, and get on an airplane and spread it to 400 other people. Whereas with SARS, people were so sick, they couldn't get on the plane. So it was contained and it never became a global pandemic. And so its ability to do that is one of the other reasons. The other thing that I think, as a physician, I don't know if a lot of people really understand, are the long-term consequences of infection. So one of my best friends, his son in his 20s got it last year.
And he was a super athlete. I used to work out with him and stuff at the gym in Loma Linda in California. And it took him 8 to 9 months before he was able to run, jump, lift weights, play ball, do all the things he did at the beginning. Because it is this impact that it can have on the body that is long-term, up to and including like brain fog. So we see a lot of patients who are, we now call them long haulers, and I see them in clinic that, it just doesn't go away in a sense. They still have chest pain, they still can't breathe, but some of them months go by, they still can't smell or taste. So it's not just the deaths either. It's not just the mortality. It's also the morbidity that we hope to avoid, so that people don't long-term lose, respiratory function, brain function, and other things.
I'm not trying to be insensitive about the death. One death is too much.
Right.
My cousin died in Iran from COVID. My friend died in California from COVID. My brother, Shabbat, and his family, all of them got COVID. And so I've been familiar with it in that context. I'm just looking at numbers. I'm not the greatest mathematician, but I'm just looking at numbers.
No, a lot of people ask that question. My thing is, there's two ways you have to look at it. And I like when, talking about medical missionary work, when you're in front of that individual, what matters is that individual, right? That's what matters in the moment. And this, I hate to say it, I wish it wasn't real. I wish it would just go away. I do believe, I don't know if I'll get to the prophecy part of this, but when the children of Israel were in Egypt, there were 10 last plagues. There were 10 plagues that ended Egypt, 10 last plagues in Egypt. The first 3, everybody died. Everybody was affected by the first 3 plagues. You all remember that? The first 3 plagues, the children of Israel, as well as the Egyptians suffered from. But it was the last 7 plagues that were reserved for just the Egyptians. And the last one was reserved only for those who had not covered their whole posts with blood. That's the vibe I get from this. I get the vibe that what we're dealing with right now are pestilences that the whole world is going to have to deal with for a little while. As we move to a place where there are going to be 7 last plagues that we will truly be shielded from. So we'll see.
Next.
Okay, I have a question here. I wanted to take, I signed up to take a course at college, and they asked me if I was vaccinated, and I gave them the answer. So they said to me that I need to take a test, a blood test, for, so that they can see, check a test for MMR, right? And I did the test, I went to the clinic, and I got the test done, and they called me with the results, and they said that my antibodies were in good condition, good shape. So now, from what I understand is, sure babies who were breastfed and who are breastfed, they get antibodies from the mother's right milk. Okay, if a person is healthy, they don't have all this, their stress level is not super high, they don't have all these pre-existing conditions, would that test suffice for not having to take the vaccine if the antibodies are very good?
That's what I'm saying. They haven't done that yet. So I think soon they will figure out the right antibody levels that would say you're protected or you're not protected, but they don't have that. For COVID, they don't have that yet.
So why would the clinic tell me when they gave me my results, they said you have great antibodies?
Was that for MMR?
Yes, for
Yeah.
MMR.
I would say they have that for MMR, they don't have it for COVID.
Okay.
Yeah, so that exists for MMR, because we've been dealing with MMR since, the 50s of last century, so there's a lot of good science around it. They don't know that yet, but this new virus. All right, I want to put the rest of the questions off to the end, and then let's finish the talk, because a lot of some of the questions, like, how quercetin and vitamin D and stuff like that is what we're going to talk about now. So let's talk about the other half of this, and then we can take the rest of the questions, all right? All right, so.
Are we taking a break?
Yeah, we can take, I am happy to take a break.
Let's take a 10-minute break.
Okay, 10 minutes.